Hey, quick context as to what this video is. This is the recording of my talk and presentation from Black Hat USA titled Lesser Known Linux Persistence Mechanisms. Now, I had given this presentation with my day job, Huntress. And let me please say, this is not a sponsored video. Huntress did not sponsor me or pay or anything to get this video uploaded. I guess, they pay my salary, but I just genuinely thought, hey, this is a cool presentation. I hope the technical work, the concepts, the material, I hope that's educational and valuable for you. But the inspiration from this talk is just, hey, you know what? We've got a new Linux agent out in beta. We have a Linux agent for our EDR platform. That's super cool. This is just off the tails of us announcing the, now Jen Easterly, the former director of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, coming to work with us on our team, on our board, and even a super sweet partnership with Microsoft. So a lot of cool stuff. Check it out if you want. But look, let me get to the actual presentation. Lesser known Linux persistence mechanisms. All right. Hey, thanks so much, everyone. Look, my name is John Hammond. I am a principal security researcher over at Huntress. Huntress is a managed security platform, hey, providing security for all companies, EDR, SIEM, SAT, ITDR, all the cool buzzword bingo acronym stuff. But what I'd like to talk with you about today is Linux and lesser known Linux persistence mechanisms. And if it's all right with you, I guess we can just kind of dive in. Yeah? Sweet. I know we've only got like 20 minutes, so we're going to try and speed run and have some fun. Look, so we're talking about persistence. And I've got the obligatory MITRE ATT&CK framework screenshot here, so you know what I mean. Persistence, when an adversary, bad actor, hacker will maintain access. They'll keep a foothold, they'll keep a backdoor, they'll keep some means of getting back in to that host or that environment to do more damage and wreak havoc. Now, the reason that we wanted to do this thing, why we're chatting about this, is because if way back in Huntress history, foothold and persistence was exactly the first thing that we kind of started with. It was originally in the Windows world, but now we've expanded that to Mac and now Linux, so we're getting pretty excited about it. But I wanted to chat more about those Linux persistence mechanisms. So if you were to hop over into the Huntress portal, if you were checking out what we're up to, whether you started a trial, kickstart, kick the tires, whatever, you can download and you'll see a Linux agent on the way. All that to say, let's dive into the persistence mechanisms that you probably already know, just to get this stuff out of the way, because this is the boring boilerplate crap that we probably just like, oh yeah, okay, this again, sort of thing. So we'll start with that, and then hopefully I can give you some new good nuggets. But if you all think of persistence, some of you might think of, we probably want to do this with root privileges as the admin in the Linux world, root user, super user. So I'm going to use a little bit of a connotation here for like a user prompt with that $ in the command line and the root prompt with the hashtag #. Fun fact, the scientific term for that is octothorpe. And now you know. That's a good little nugget for you. All right, so obviously boring, yawn, we know you could add a backdoor user. That's not very sexy, that's not very elite, not very cool, but it would be a backdoor user. That is a persistence mechanism to get back in if you give it a password you could use. But folks tend to know that, right? It's not sophisticated or stealthy or neat, it's just another opportunity. Maybe you'll add SSH keys, secure shell. Folks are familiar with SSH, correct? Yes? Okay. If not, that's okay. This is a safe space. SSH keys are saying, okay, a private and public key pair that I might use to gain access back into that machine. Granted, this relies on SSH, the secure shell, being open on port 22. That would need to be the access vector if you were to do that. But again, whatever. We kind of shrug it off. We've seen that kind of thing before. And with that, maybe you'll do cron jobs. Okay, cool. Folks are familiar with cron jobs. These are these scheduled, automated timing things like an alarm clock you set to wake up every morning. But you could toggle this not to be a specific time of day or every couple of minutes. You could do this on reboot or whatever. So what I'm doing, you might be able to see as I echo that into a cron tab, I pipe it in just, so we have that input going into the standard output there. I'm running a binary user local bin backdoor, quote unquote. And that could be whatever. That could be a payload, that could be some other malware, that could be our callback to command and control, blah, blah, blah. Kind of get the gist on that, right? Again, we're still in our boring basics, but maybe we have systemd services, very similar to services in the Windows world, maybe systemd or sysv, some of the old school stuff, systemd in a different way you would use either systemctl or the service command on the command line. These are all things you define as text, right? And that's always been the core of Linux, is plain text. You can pipe that in and out of the terminal really easily, and that might be something that either isn't all that fancy because it's plain text, it could be easily manipulated, or we might be actually able to do some sinister stuff with it when we get into other more sophisticated, air quotes, rootkits or other persistence mechanisms there. Another one, maybe you're working with those remote, I believe, what is it? Runtime control or run control files, bash RC, etc profile, other spots that will automatically trigger as you either log in to that interactive environment or spawn a new terminal, etc., every time you open bash or Z shell, ZSH, etc. These are all, again, kind of like, okay, we sort of know these. Yeah, basically, right? Is this still boring and dumb so far? Cool. I appreciate boring and dumb. You can do the same for other programs, right? Vim, command line text editor. We could start the holy wars, Vim versus Nano, Emacs, whatever. But all those things could be done in those other scenarios. Questions, though, when I was alluding to the user local bin payload or whatever we actually try to execute or run, again, that could be whatever you want. That's a variable. That's dynamic. That could be whatever you're most interested in. Maybe it's a compiled binary or a shell script, whatever the case may be. What I would probably be the easy button, as folks would, again, just be like, oh, yeah, okay. What about a shell? What about a reverse shell or a bind shell? If folks weren't tracking, obviously the bind shell is listening on that victim, on the target that you've compromised. Easy opportunity with that is with netcat. Granted, I'm using netcat NC with the old, I think traditional is probably the right vernacular for that one, where you have the -E flag or -E to be able to run a command or a program. Here we run bin bash, listening on port 9001 because it's over 9000. That's a joke. DNS is removed with -N, V for verbose, P for that port number over 9000. And then we can connect back to it as the attacker. Now reverse shells, normally we tend to see in, that CTF world, capture the flag, try hack me, hack the box, blah, 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 whatever. Bind shells might give you a little bit, quote unquote, more stealth if you maybe sneak it in some way, make it sleep, make it dormant. You got a lot of creativity there. But reverse shells could probably stick out like a sore thumb. Granted, it is one opportunity to get your connection back, to get your call back. Here we flip the script. We just make a connection from the victim calling back home to the attacker. We use TAC-E as the opportunity there, once again. I won't belittle that too much, but I think it's more fun to do anything else you want. Curl, of course, being an opportunity to pull down a payload from a remote resource, like a website, HTTP, HTML, whatever. Consider adversary website, their external C2 domain, and you pipe that to bash, or you pipe it to your shell. Ampersand here to format, to put that in the background, and now, okay, you're off and running. You got code. But, again, maybe you do something a little bit more flashy or fancy from GTF Opens. Are folks familiar with that resource? There's a fun acronym, of course, GT, get the F out. Like the lol bins living off the land binaries in the Windows world, a Linux equivalent. But now that I've wasted 5 minutes, let's talk about maybe, hopefully, some persistence mechanisms that you maybe haven't heard of or aren't as familiar, just a little bit more esoteric than add a new user, put another service in. Now, there are a lot of opportunities here. Are folks familiar with the prompt command variable? Yeah, okay, a couple. These are ones that will actually execute, I believe, after a command will run. I will need to double check because there's another opportunity if you were to use a trap. When you have a trap configured inside of your terminal, that debug will allow you to run something before a command would run. That will, again, every single time there is interaction on that terminal in the command line, fire off something else. That could be your payload, that could be your backdoor, other code you would want to run. That's an opportunity. That's a little bit sneaky. Maybe you cram that into your bash RC or your etc profile or something that could trigger this, but on its own, that might not look as malicious as it sticking out outright in another patch.t. One opportunity there. And of course, you've got other options for aliases. Those are simple, small things like, oh, we just gave a nickname to some other command that you might naturally run. Think like ls, think cat, think history, who am I, pwd, cd, whatever you want. You, of course, have a creative canvas there. Same thing with functions. You can do that very, very same thing. Maybe that's another one that we're like, oh yeah, okay, we've seen that before. But let's talk about SSH again. Let's kind of go back and revisit Secure Shell if that's an opportunity for us. Usually, you'll have a user configured SSH config file right out of your home directory. So that's that tilde, right? Squiggly line for your home directory, or the victim, the target, who you're impacting, putting our hacker hat on, acting as the adversary. In that .ssh file, or if you did this even in that root global all everywhere across the system file, there's a proxy command feature, which I don't know if you've ever seen, but this is as you make a connection with SSH, you have a command that runs. Something else that executes as a program, as another opportunity, as a proxy, quote unquote. So if you wanted to, if you were stealthy a little bit, you could make the capability and functionality to actually complete the transport and do a SSH communication. Or if you wanted to just break stuff, hey, you could have that binary, your payload, just run your malware, run whatever commands or execution you would want. But that's one opportunity with SSH, proxy command in the configuration files, or even sometimes in the command line arguments. You can pass TAC-O to be able to do that. Proxy command is what we're zooming in on there. The host actually lets you configure that. You'll notice I have a star or an asterisk, kind of as a wild card. That could be any host, but you could tweak that to be any specific host name or port if you wanted to get a little shady and stealthy with that. This one I really like, actually. Another SSH alternative where you no longer use the authorized keys file, but you cram it in to another file, whatever you want. You could name it, you could hide it, it could have the dot prefix so that it's hidden. And if you just include that or run any other command, that could work just as well. Interesting thing, if you configure that in the SSHD server, not just the client, but the server configuration, that will actually allow you to specify a thing that runs every time someone would invoke an authorized key connection with that. So your opt hidden keys or any other folder or file you wanted to hide something in, smuggle a payload in or do some damage there. Now this one is honestly one of my favorites, but it is kind of tough to find. Folks heard of TCP wrapped services, and it's okay. Some it's okay, some have, some not. So if you run LDD, one command to list all the loaded libraries or .so files that some other Linux binaries pull in, you could see libwrap or libtcp wrap. If you find that, you get to configure any other file you might like and /etc hosts.allow or /etc hosts.deny. And you could say, look, if you connect either with SSH, something that could pull in that libwrap library, or even some other capabilities, and I'll tell you about that one in just a moment, you could use and run and execute your backdoor, your payload, user local bin, whatever. This is very cool. I've seen this and I got to play with this, and I'll admit it was in Kali when I got to test it, so I don't know how often you're going up against a Kali Linux machine. But SNMP, like SNMP community strings, SNMP, that UDP protocol, includes libTCP wrap. So from a remote machine, if you added this backdoor on a victim, if you tried to run SNMP just to walk the community strings of another host, this would fire. And I thought that's kind of cool. Like you can remotely trigger your backdoor, your payload. So would definitely recommend keeping an eye out for those TCP wrapped services. I think that's a good one, personally. Now this one, PAM degradation attacks, folks are probably familiar with. Maybe you nod and follow along with this one. As you log in to Linux, as you enter your command line, you log in Ubuntu, root, whatever the case may be, that's all handled by the Pluggable Authentication Module, or PAM. And you might have seen inside of your /var or /etc directories, you can see a lot of the PAM configuration files. Some of those are shared object files, .so things that you could determine, okay, what is the correct authentication? When do I allow someone to log in, or we deny it one way or the other? Now you can craft your own PAM login modules, your pluggable authentication modules. You can make your own. So over on the left-hand side, it might be kind of hard to read, but there's a backdoor that we had put together some time ago for a Cyber Force competition or capture the flag training environment. We were up against a blue team and a red team. So as a red team, we were thinking, you know what? Let's backdoor PAM and enter so that no matter what login, credential, password, whatever a user actually used, we'd let them in and authenticate if they entered sneaky password. But you could configure it to be whatever you want. You could make it Apple. You could make it microphone. You could make it anything, because you get to control that once you embed and put that in. Of course, you'd need the root privileges to do that, but that's persistence. There's a backdoor. You define a password for any and all user, allow them in. There's a very recent Bleeping Computer article. You might be able to see it on the right-hand side there. This was August 4th, so 2 days ago. There's a recent Linux malware payload that was, what was it called? The Plague, and Nextron Systems was covering it. So Florian Roth and some of his cool folks, they were saying, look, this did exactly that. This used a PAM degradation attack and had a backdoored pluggable authentication module to log in with whatever credentials they wanted. Neat. Have folks seen that one before? Kind of familiar with a little bit with PAM? Sort of, kind of. Now we'll get to the fun, sexy stuff, right? Everyone kind of gets pretty hyped up and excited about, like, whoa, a rootkit. Wang, it sounds so cool. Now we're thinking about userland rootkits to start. What I'm going to show you, I hope it'll give you a decent resource. I'll make this bigger and hopefully give you that link on the next slide. But there's one of those GitHub Awesome links or GitHub Awesome resources that just lists a ton of these. One that I really like is called Prism. This is a userland rootkit. So, hey, not at the kernel, nothing elite, nothing low level quite yet, but it operates over ICMP. Folks know what ICMP is? Yeah, ping, cool, easy. So normally when you're looking for malicious traffic, you're looking for, whoa, HTTP, web shell communication, DNS, exfilling data. How often do you look at ping traffic? Some do, some might, kind of varies, but that one was pretty neat and pretty stealthy. Another competition event we've seen was a Pros versus Joes. They do that often at B-Sides Las Vegas. So just a couple days here before that is their red team would use this. They use Prism as the userland rootkit to be able to communicate, get their C2 over ICMP. Kind of cool, I thought. Now, a next one here. I know we're getting to probably the end of things here, but if you wanted to take a look at that awesome Linux rootkits, let me bear in mind this was strictly rootkits in that resources, but it's another GitHub Awesome link. One of those references a project and utility called Reptile. Happen to know, does anyone know another content creator or YouTube fellow? His name is Ipsec, or Nick Ipsec. He covers a lot of the Hack the Box training material, etc. I learned Reptile from Nick, from Ipsec. He covers this in some other previous old videos, but one of the coolest things about Reptile, because this is an LKM, like Linux kernel module, but if you wanted to modify a lot of the C code, like the low-level source code that it uses, you could actually specify what the kernel will respond to any user or input or programmer interface reading a file from your Linux system. So say we were playing some King of the Hill game, quote unquote, but maybe nerds and geeks are familiar with like Hack the Box Battlegrounds or Try Hack Me King of the Hill. Again, silly, practice playgrounds, cybercrime shenanigans. But what they'd get to do is say, look, if I planted a flag in the ground that said John is the one that owns this server, if another individual were to come and go beat it up, they compromise the box, maybe Ben is now the next one that wants to claim their ownership. Well, we've got Reptile or some other Linux kernel module that says, like, sure, that's fine. You can modify, you can write to the file, you can make the change. I don't care. But every time that the server, the computer, any program, anything else reads that file, it will always tell you, no matter what, John is the contents of this file, the actual output or contents you receive. I think that's neat. Because when you think back to a whole lot of those Linux persistence mechanisms that are like SSH, configuration files, authorized keys, etc., password, etc., shadow, they're all text files. So you could force the operating system and the kernel to make that give you the output that you want. The backdoor, the persistence payload, etc., etc. Keep an eye on those if that's okay with you. I think that's a good opportunity. Let me speed run for the last couple of moments here. I think there's another really cool utility that would be helpful for you all if you are playing with this. How could we automate and test a lot of these Linux persistence mechanisms? Let me give credit where credit is due. This is a project called Panics. Are folks familiar with this? Have you seen this before? On GitHub, customizable Linux persistence tool for research and detection engineering. Let me give credit where credit is due, and I'll let a couple more folks take a quick picture. But it's these persistence mechanisms against Unix systems. And I gotta say, hey, this was put together by a lot of sweet researchers and smart folks over at Elastic. I do want to give them everything, all the blessing, all the kudos, but it's very, very cool because it's just a ton of bash scripts. Super modular, super customizable, but it has almost all of the things that we got to touch on and talk about here. Maybe a couple that aren't in that list that we covered, some that are in this list that we didn't cover, etc. But that is a really, really sweet utility, and it's just a whole lot of command line opportunities to be able to test those. So I hope Panics is a good resource for you if you haven't seen it before. But big shout out to Ruben, big shout out to the developer. Again, I want to give them that credit where credit is due. Elastic's doing smart stuff. I'm not afraid to say it. All right. Thanks, everybody. That was like a 20-minute crash course on Linux persistence mechanisms, but my goodness, there's still a heck of a lot of stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Backdooring GitHub, GitHub utilities and GitHooks, set UID binaries, LD preload hijacking for other libraries you load, so much stuff. And it's all the stuff that we get to chase over at Huntress. Well, we're building out this new Linux agent, and we're excited about that as the other opportunities. Thank you so much, everybody. Look, I will say that back at our booth, if you're willing to join us, we're back over there just a little bit. You might be able to see the Huntress logo from here. We have a super special guest and I'm really excited about. I don't know if folks saw the news, but Jen Easterly, the previous director of CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, just came on board with us as a strategic advisor. So she has a awesome new presentation coming up. So I'd love for you all to come hang out, follow me to the booth, and we'll see you there. Thank you, everybody.